about $480 million. Its shares closed higher today, closing out a 15% rise so far in the year. But bank stocks over in Kenya have been a bit of a mixed bag. Peers like Equity up 17%. On the other hand, DTP down 10.5% so far this year. Here's what's coming up tonight. Thousands of passengers stranded due to a strike at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. We'll take a look at the latest disagreements between the EU and the US as far as trade is concerned. And Microsoft sets up 2 cloud centers in South Africa. All right, then let's start in East Africa tonight. Kenya's transport minister has some pretty harsh words for striking workers at the country's main international airport in Nairobi. Flights were grounded due to a protest over a labor dispute among matters affecting 3 airports in the country. Following that fallout, officials appointed a team to mediate and try and resolve this dispute. CGTN's Daniel Arap starting us off tonight.
A strike by the Kenyan Aviation Workers Union caused a major crisis at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, leaving hundreds of thousands of travelers stranded. The strike follows a labor dispute over contracts and job security between the Kenya Aviation Workers Union and Kenya Airways. Hundreds of passengers got stranded at the airport after their flights were delayed or rescheduled, with many expressing frustration.
Most of us are not notified on the delays and any inconveniences that are coming up. And we also have inconveniences because if we are connecting on the other side, we are deemed to miss the flights.
I started from Mombasa this morning, 2 o'clock. I was supposed to connect going to London. And what I see is this one. When I arrived in Nairobi, I'm supposed to leave by now. I don't know what's going to happen next minute.
The striking Kenya aviation workers who downed their tools are unhappy with what they say is unfair staff hiring and compensation by management, including the proposed takeover of the country's biggest international business hub by Kenya Airways. The strike also drew sharp criticism from the country's transport secretary.
Not interfere with the security installation, especially when you have no basis for complaints. When you have a job, nobody has failed to pay your salary. Nobody has given you a threat that your job you'll be at risk, and yet you go on a strike. You have been given assurances that the numbers are going up in terms of employment, and you still go on strike. That is called malice. It is called sabotage. It is called economic sabotage. It is something which cannot be tolerated. It is criminal activity, and that's why you found the security agencies are here. They managed to chase away everybody who was bringing trouble.
Jomo Kenyatta International Airport is Kenya's largest aviation facility and the busiest airport in East Africa. Its importance as an aviation center makes it the pace setter for both domestic and international travelers. By press time, all operations had been returned to normalcy, including flights to different destinations. Daniel Arap Moi, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Right, then CGTN's Robert Nagila was covering the events at JKIA a little earlier today. Just been now live in studio. Good to see you. So let's start with the background to this, because it's not just a labor dispute to the extent of jobs are being lost, so there's a pay issue here. What exactly triggered this?
Well, Ramah, there are 2 main issues here at play. Now, the first one is a labor dispute, of course, regarding pay and work conditions and so on. The second one is the proposed takeover of Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, which is Kenya's main airport, by the national carrier Kenya Airways. Now, the unionized workers, the union itself and the workers seem to believe that a lot of jobs will be lost if that happens, so they are totally against that. But there is a feeling out there that they jumped the gun, because it's still before Parliament, it's still being discussed. It's not a done deal by any chance at all.
Let's just give our viewers a bit of background on this, because essentially what KQ is asking for is, give us the airport, give us a concession to run JKIA for the better part of, I think it's about 20 years. Yep. And the idea is to essentially have a similar vertically integrated strategy, similar to what we're seeing with carriers in the region, Ethiopian, Emirates, Rwanda, and so on and so forth.
Absolutely, because Kenya Airways says, listen, in today's climate, as an airline to survive, this needs to happen. And they point out that look at what Ethiopian Airlines are doing, Emirates, you've got Qatar, Rwanda Air, and so on and so on. So this is the model that they would like to adopt. However, it's already run into some headwinds. There's a lot of information being put out there. A lot of it is not true at all. And it has now been politicized. That's where the major problem is. But just going really quickly back to this strike. Now, they had been before an industrial court. There was an injunction out, and both parties had agreed to it. So this strike was supposed to have been suspended. So everybody was caught with their pants down last night when the go-slow began, affecting hundreds, in fact, thousands of passengers.
Right, so flights did resume later on in the day, and we're seeing the Aviation Authority, KA, all saying, well, we're clearing the backlog, same thing from KQ and Jambo did. And they also did draft in Air Force personnel at one point to help with this entire process. But that's just a stopgap measure, isn't it? It can't go on forever.
Absolutely. And you've got to look at it from this context. Look, the union leader, who the government is supposed to be negotiating with,
he's behind bars now,
has been arrested, exactly. So the union workers are in limbo at the moment. Nobody really knows where this is going.
Yeah.
You've got the minister in charge of transport calling them criminals. He had first put out a tweet earlier today saying that, look, it's just about 30 workers, everybody else is at work, okay? Now, the crowds are so 3-4 times more than that. It was a lot of people out there protesting against these moves. And
the optics of it also pretty bad, aren't
absolutely.
they? Because
I mean, it's the first time.
We've both seen the footage. You know, you've got 1 minute people are sitting down, they're waiting to get into the terminals and not being told what's going on. You've got essentially what was a peaceful demo going on, and then riot police show up and they start whacking everyone with batons left, right and centre.
It was such a mess, Ramah, really, because you have riot police firing tear gas inside the airport, just next to the terminals, and you had foreign visitors there, you had locals who were also travelling, caught up in this mix, and people just scattering all over the place. It was a big mess, and the optics of it, which were captured by all the media across the world, are really not good for this country. And
right.
This is something that the government needs to look at. How do you approach crowd control and in sensitive areas as well? So these are things that they need to sit down and look at. But just going back to your earlier question, in terms of whether it was back to normal or not. Yeah. Now, the minister sent out a tweet at about midday saying, look, we've resolved the issues that had caused the major disruption at the airport. So they expect everything to go back. And they said that three flights from Kenya Airways going to Mumbai, to London, and I think Dakar would be following shortly. Yeah. That didn't happen. What we've seen is a lot of passengers booked in hotels for the night, understandably, because as you said, rescheduling the flights, you've got people who are in transit, all affected, so it's a whole mess. And then on top of that, you've got the baggage issues as well. Number of people needed to man JKIA. You've got about 30 airlines, international airlines, if I'm not wrong, between 27 and 30 that apply out of this particular airport. It's the second busiest in the region after Addis. So, I mean, yes, huge impact.
This is going to be deeply problematic. Right. Thanks, then, for bringing up to speed. All right, then. Robert Nagila there, of course, was covering events a little earlier at JKIA. Now, we're still in the region. Authorities in Tanzania are urging foreign investors to still consider the country as a prime investment destination. And that is still despite some pretty high-profile disputes with companies like Acacia Mining, for instance, where Tanzania slapped it with a tax bill several times higher than the country's GDP. Here's CGTN's Daniel Kija now, speaking with Tanzania's Industry and Trade Minister, Joseph Kakunda, to get the details of the country's investment pitch.
Thank you, sir, for talking to CGTN. Let's start at the top. Give me a brief overview of Tanzania and industrialization.
The National Development Vision of 2000 was designed to be implemented in 25 years to transform the economy of Tanzania from a backward economy into a middle-level country by 2025.
So what measures have been taken to protect infant industry, sir?
The first action or the first move to protect industries is to ensure that they get raw materials. because without raw materials, we have no industry. It will die. Second level of production is to make sure that there is fair competition.
Let's look at Tanzania in the face of regional integration. Are Tanzanian industries ready to compete?
We are ready to compete. We are producing good quality products in Tanzania. And I can mention you more than 10 items that are internationally recognized as competitively manufactured in Tanzania.
Towards the end of last year, the government took charge of the cashew nut industry, bought cashew nut, and said it will control who will buy. Now, where are we? What's the latest on this cashew nut issue?
We're going to sell to any buyer, and we have invited any buyer who wants to buy cashew to come to the government, bring your offer. We call you, we invite you for negotiations. We negotiate. If we agree, we sell to you.
In recent years, there have been some members of the international community who have criticized policy changes in Tanzania. What do you tell investors across the world when it comes to policies of industrialization in Tanzania now?
So we want to make sure that the products go to the market, the transportation costs are down. We want to make sure that the energy costs is going to be down. We want to make sure that the land costs are going to go down. We want to make sure that the regulatory costs are going to go down. So those are major issues that are providing the business environment, which is very welcome, and which is will make sure that the investors, they reap what they have programmed in their business plans.
Thank you so much, sir, for sitting down with CGTN.
Thank you very much.
Right then, our company news wrap. Let's start with Dangote Industries. The president of that conglomerate, Aliko Dangote, has restated his group's commitment to Nigeria's economic development through continuous innovation, value creation and investment. Africa's richest man says Dangote Cement will strive to raise its revenue target from African countries to $600 million a year. South Africa's market conduct regulator is investigating trades in the shares of AO Technology Solutions and its main shareholder, African Equity Empowerment Investments, for possible market manipulation. The agency announced it's currently investigating 13 cases of possible insider trading, 14 of market manipulation, as well as 7 of false or misleading reporting at JSE-listed companies. Shares of MTN have dropped to their worst level in nearly 6 months as the market comes to terms with the mobile operator's lower than expected earnings for 2018. The group's stock slipped more than 10% in less than a week after issuing a rather disappointing profit guidance. And finally, the ousted Nissan boss Carlos Ghosn has been released from a prison in Tokyo, a detention center actually, after posting bail of $9 million. This was his third bail request and the first by his new legal team. Ghosn has been in Japanese custody since his arrest last November on allegations that he understated his income while at Nissan. That's a run through your company headlines. We're 15 minutes into the hour. Time for break. Here's what's coming up next. Egypt is introducing a new debt control strategy to cut public debt levels. And Tunisia forecasts that inflation will fall to 6.8% in the first quarter of 2019.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global business. Only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
situation on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra Naidu. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business. There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference. Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back to the program. Let's head over to North Africa now. Egypt's finance ministry has announced a debt control strategy. It's essentially a 4-year plan that aims to cut the country's public debt levels, which currently stand at about 102% of GDP. Here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim with the details.
Coming out of 2 uprisings and terrorism that have crippled the economy, the government resorted to a process of borrowing to rebuild its economy and provide funds for public services. Public debt has reached 102% of GDP, and international debt 92% of GDP. A plan is in place to reduce the mushrooming debt.
The target is to reduce the public and external debt to 80% and to reschedule the debt repayment plan. It was short-term payments before, which puts pressure on the government to pay loans every 3 to 6 months. The government is now issuing long-term bonds, 3 years, 5 years and 10 years.
The debt control strategy is a 4-year plan, working on several levels simultaneously.
The way that they are formulating moving forward with the strategic plan is to put together some reform mechanisms. One major concept is the inclusion of the informal market with the formal market, and that on its own should have quite an impact of about $10 billion into the economy if that is able to be implemented. A lot of other tax measures have been undertaken as well, started to remove subsidies of the energy, subsidies of transportation, other food product. There has to be manufacturing, there has to be exports, there has to be new investments coming into the economy for us to be able to create these jobs that we need for us to be able to reduce the public debt.
But there are challenges along the way.
There are 2 other parts of this equation, variables that need to be looked at, and that is the impact of international markets such as the oil and gas market. Any increases, as we saw last year in the oil prices, has a major impact on both the public debt and the external debt. The other thing is, of course, the currency fluctuations, since Egypt has floated its pound, and hence that can be an impact as well on both public and external debt.
Most experts say the success of such program will benefit the predominantly poor population.
The money saved will be spent on health services, education and infrastructure projects. This will also lift the pressure of public debt and reduce loans from local banks that attract high interest rates. Reducing debt will also relieve the financial burden of future generations.
Experts say the public debt is high, but not at dangerous levels. However, the government insists to begin its 4-year debt control strategy before loans reach a very high level that is unattainable or difficult to repay. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Authorities in Tunisia forecast that inflation will drop to about 6.8% in the first quarter of 2019. Amidst years of low single-digit GDP growth and government debt to GDP ratios well over 60%, the North African state has been struggling to kickstart growth and boost income levels. Analysts believe that 2019 could be a year of recovery if structural reforms are implemented. CGTN's Anin Chachi has the details.
According to the report on economic and monetary developments, February 2019, published by the Central Bank of Tunisia, inflation is expected to drop in the first quarter to end at 6.8% versus 7.5% in December 2018, in light of the forecasting exercise for January 2019.
The medium-term projections suggest, in perspective, a gradual reduction in the rate of inflation while remaining on a relatively high level. Inflation is expected to fall from 7.3% in 2018 to 6.8% in 2019 and then to 6.7% in 2020.
In terms of monthly changes, the Consumer Price Index CPI rose 0.8% in January.
For the month of February, CPI is expected to stagnate before posting a further increase in March by 0.4%, which would give an average monthly rise of 0.4% in the first quarter of 2019, compared with 0.6% a year earlier.
Authorities say core inflation, excluding administered products and fresh food products, shows a bearish trend, being expected at 7.8% in March 2019 against 8.8% in December 2018.
Core inflation would remain at troubling levels despite its expected deceleration. It's expected to stay around 8% on average during the first quarter of 2019.
According to the Finance Ministry, the inflation forecasting exercise for the first quarter of the current year is based on assumptions about the same rate of depreciation of the dinar exchange rate as the fourth quarter of 2018, the price adjustment of some energy products, and an increase in the salaries of public enterprises and the civil service of 6%. The Central Bank of Tunisia has recently raised its key interest rate by 100 basis points, bringing it from 6.75% to 7.75%. The bank's governor said that without this action, inflation would have been higher or even double-digit. Analysts predict a fall in the inflation rate to less than 7% at the end of 2019. CGTN, Tunis.
South Africa's Public Enterprises Ministry has appointed a new technical team to investigate a range of issues at the loss-making load-shedding utility Eskom. The 11-member team is expected to conduct a full operations audit at all of Eskom's power stations over the next 4 weeks. Here's CGTN's Angela Coppola with the details.
It follows a meeting recently where Gordhan and Mining Minister Gwede Mantashe met mining executives and large Eskom clients to plot a way forward. But not everyone thinks it's a good idea.
You now have the original task team that was established in December by the President and the Leader of Government Business. You then have a task team that the President established that's an inter-ministerial task team. You then have a task team that's established within Eskom and its board itself. And then you have 8 engineers that we've imported from Italy who are also here to do a certain something that we're not sure of. Now, no one wants to tell us exactly what they're doing. What we do know is this: everyone is operating in silos, if you'll pardon the pun, so they have their own boiler rooms, and we don't know if they're reporting to the same head office.
The utility has been through a rough period, with load shedding being the order of the day, and consumers are bracing themselves for more bad news from the regulator.
The crisis is not being averted in any which way, shape or form. And the fact of the matter is there is a very good chance that on Thursday, you and I are going to be paying a lot more for electricity while these task teams continue to operate in their silos with a shroud of secrecy over them.
As it stands, plans are being made to break the utility up into 3 units. Another option, though, has been put forward.
I would immediately start the separation of Eskom I would split it into two separate entities. I would create a transmission entity where the South African public retain control of the grid, because I think it's a good national asset. And I would separate generation. The first thing I would do is I would start introducing independent power producers onto my generation. And as we moved along and as supply became more readily available, I would start selling off power stations to municipalities that had the ability to control those power stations and to run them effectively.
Eskom management has not been available for comment on progress being made to stabilise electricity supply since the first presidential task team was appointed in December.
The National Union of Mine Workers agrees that there are too many task teams and it's going to lead to confusion. They're calling it a recipe for disaster. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
But still in Africa's most industrialized economy, where a new board has been appointed to head the local chapter of the BRICS Business Council. Now, that group aims to enhance trade and investments, not just among the 5 members of the bloc, but also the members of the African Continental Free Trade Area.
Well, their mandate is quite simply to enhance business-to-business cooperation with our fellow members of BRICS. That's been the mandate that our chapters have had in the past. We've just renewed our membership, and that will be just before we hand over the chair of the BRICS Business Council to Brazil, which will take place next month in Johannesburg.
The local chapter is getting a mandate to actually reach out to the rest of the continent in light of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement and ensure that the BRICS opportunity is actually realized by everybody in the continent. If you add everybody in the African continent, then you're talking about almost 60% of world population, and an area where the population is growing, GDP is growing at much higher rates, so the opportunity is enormous. It behoves us as the South Africa chapter.
It's time for another break. You're watching Global Business Africa. Here's what's coming up next. We'll take a look at trade disagreements between the EU and the United States. And Huawei launches a cybersecurity transparency center in Brussels.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant.
Only on CGTN.
For look at economic data out of the country, the country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Perina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives. News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are these stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in.
Business in Africa is
After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy, you simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Ucheo Koronkwo. I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN.
Welcome back. EU leaders are in Washington discussing sticky trade points as far as trade with the US is concerned. Now, the United States is insisting that the talks between them and renegotiating the trading relationship must include agriculture. But the EU, however, wants a much narrower focus purely on industrial goods. So then, where does this leave these two allies across the Atlantic? Let's get the latest on this from CGTN's Giles Gibson, who joins us now live from Washington, D.C. So, Giles, let's start with that demarcation. The EU wants only to talk about industrial goods and nothing else. The Americans want to talk about agriculture. Why?
Ramah, the issue seems to be around timing. Negotiating an entire trade deal between the European Union and the United States would of course take months and months and months. Meanwhile, the EU, they want a very fast deal on this issue of industrial goods because of course they are already under the pressure of existing US tariffs on steel and aluminium. Meanwhile, as that's going on, they are also facing the possibility in the months ahead down the road of tariffs also coming down on the very important car making sector that currently exists in Europe.
Right, so going by the comments from Larry Kudlow, who's the director of the National Economic Council, it sounds like agriculture has been contentious all the way back from July. But what is it that these two sides disagree on, other than standards on pesticides use, residue levels, and of course, whether or not to allow genetically modified foods into their markets?
Well, Ramah, even though they can't even agree on things like pesticides, things like those issues that you were raising, the two sides can't even agree on what is actually on the table, what is actually up for discussion. Cecilia Malmström, she's the EU Trade Commissioner, said just last month, we are not talking about agriculture. That's a fairly clear statement, you would think. On the other hand, of course, as you were saying in your question, Larry Kudlow, the director of the NEC, he said not that long ago, you're not going to have a far-reaching EU trade deal without agriculture. So before they get into the details, really, like pesticides, like some of the issues that you raised there, they need to be able to agree on what is actually on the table as these talks go ahead.
Indeed, these talks also, as I understand it, should also focus on how the WTO can be reformed. But given the Trump administration's view of the WTO, just about any multilateral institution, is there even anything they can agree on as far as WTO reform is concerned?
Well, the US is very much still the sticking point when it comes to future reforms of the World Trade Organization. We understand that the EU, China, India and some of the other major players within the organization have come to a loose agreement on what they want to see in terms of reforms to the settlement dispute process. But really, at the same time, the United States are very much holding that up. They continue to block appointments to the organization's appellate body, for example. It's supposed to have 7 members. It currently has just 3 members, and actually 2 of those 3 members, their mandates finish at the end of this year, at the end of 2019. So it's very conceivable that by the end of the year, we could see that appellate body within the WTO reduced to just 1 person and really unable to make any sorts of rulings, any sorts of decisions going forward.
Indeed. One last question for you. So the Trump administration last year essentially argued that somehow, in some dimension, that BMWs, Mercedes, Audis, basically any vehicle made in Europe, constitute a security threat to the US. But when will the results of that investigation that the president ordered, when will that be made public? And once it's made public, what options does that give Donald Trump as far as more unilateral tariffs are concerned?
Yeah, well, that investigation that you mentioned, that's known by its technical term here in Washington as a Section 232 report. That has already been sent by the Commerce Department to the White House almost 3 weeks ago. The issue is that none of its details were made public, and President Trump has 90 days to decide on his next course of action. In the meantime, we have the threats from President Trump talking about potentially putting up to 25% tariffs on the European car makers and the European car industry. That's causing a huge amount of concern right here in the United States. The National Automobile Dealers Association, they're saying that those tariffs would raise the cost of cars right across the board. They say it would, those tariffs of 25% would add more than $2,000 to the cost of US-built cars and add almost $7,000 to imported cars and trucks. So there's a huge lobbying effort by the US car industry going on right now while Donald Trump is in the middle of that 90-day decision process.
Indeed. We'll leave it there for the time being. Charles Gibson, thank you. Let's cross the Pacific now. The CPPCC's National Committee has held its first press briefing for this year's two sessions event. The theme is to fight what they describe as the three tough battles. CGTN's Huawei reports.
China has set a goal to build the country into a moderately prosperous society by 2020. The central government identified financial risks, poverty alleviation, and environmental pollution as the biggest challenges to overcome to reach the goal. They call these the three tough battles. President Xi Jinping says for financial risks, one of the major areas of focus for the financial sector should be systematic risks. Chen Yulu, a CPPCC member and deputy governor of the People's Bank of China, spoke about one risk, macro leveraging ratio. That's a ratio of a country's outstanding liabilities to its GDP. Chen says if the ratio is too high or the ratio grows too quickly, it could trigger systematic financial risks. He spoke about how this can be prevented.
It needs efforts from both the finance sector and the real economy. On the one side, we need to build a multi-level, normative, transparent, open, viable, and flexible capital market. On the other side, we need to get rid of debt, production capacity, and zombie companies. We need to support the new economy, the new industry, and the new model to realize a high-quality development of China's economy.
Air pollution was the next major topic. CPPCC member Liu Bingjiang, who's also a senior official with the Chinese Ministry of Ecology and Environment, says the country has made major progress in tackling this issue. He says the country got rid of 13,000 industrial furnaces. He also says it was the first time coal consumption dropped below 60% of overall primary energy sources.
These measures have effectively helped to continuously improve the country's air quality. PM 2.5 concentration continues to decline, and the number of days of high-quality air has been increasing.
And finally, China's plan to eradicate poverty by next year. 16.6 million people in rural areas still live in poverty, and illnesses plague just 40% of them. So one area highlighted at the conference was providing good medical services as means to lift people from poverty.
We need to make medical services affordable and ensure they have access to medical services. Also, we need to decrease the occurrence of illnesses.
Chinese Premier Li Keqiang listed fighting the three tough battles as one of the key tasks this year in his government work report. To reduce poverty, he urges governments to deeply facilitate targeted poverty alleviation, devote more capital, and improve those poor areas' abilities of self-development. Wang Hui, CGTN, Beijing.
Huawei has launched a new cybersecurity transparency center in Brussels in a bid to reassure European regulators and clients. This move comes even as the company faces a wave of criticism from countries around the world over security concerns. CGTN's Mariam Zaidi has the latest.
The doors have been opened to the media. Huawei's hope here is that this centre, just like others, say for example in Germany, with these big interactive screens with information, can really demonstrate their commitment to privacy and security and to help set better global industry standard. It also acts as a bridge between governments, regulators and, well, if you're in Brussels, EU officials. Meanwhile, the US accuses Huawei of allowing their equipment to be used for Chinese government-sanctioned surveillance. And the US government has banned their products and involvement in 5G networks. Now, it's a better story for Huawei in Europe. Just last month, Germany, for example, announced auctioning for the country's 5G network is expected to begin in March, and Huawei wouldn't be banned. But some European operators are, of course, turning their backs on Huawei. Vodafone, BT, Deutsche Telekom, they're just a few of the examples. So can Huawei rebuild trust while they're putting a lot of money and effort into projects like this one in Brussels to do just that? Mariam Zaidi, CGTN, Brussels.
China is well on its way to building the world's most extensive facial recognition database. The tech now spans a range of sectors from law enforcement, retail, transportation, and medical facilities. CGTN's Uche Okoronkwo is in Beijing to find out how this all works.
Smile for the camera. It's a phrase that's now taking on a whole new meaning in China. The country is at the forefront of finding amazing ways to put facial recognition technology to use. At Beijing's busy and crowded train stations, a network of cameras is already doing just that. Facial scanners are being used to verify passengers and track them through the city's transport network. Train operators say it increases their efficiency by eliminating the need for tickets, streamlining passenger flow, and even flagging security threats. Some commuters say it only helps them feel a little more secure on their journey.
It is more convenient. The lines also move faster now thanks to technology.
It has greatly cut down wait time. I think the face reader is also connected with the police, so I feel safer.
This is just one of several applications for facial recognition technology. It is also being used in security and police work, payment portals, financial transactions, and even hospitality, amongst others. Private China-based tech firms are rushing to invest and build this futuristic artificial intelligence-powered technology. China's SenseTime is currently the world's most valuable AI startup, valued at over $4.5 billion. Walking into its Beijing office, one is greeted by a large screen that analyzes your face and assigns an attractiveness rating. The firm dabbles in artificial intelligence software that recognizes and analyzes people and places.
We have owns our own platform, AI platform. As you probably heard around the world, you have multiple AI deep learning platform. Maybe some of our competitors you heard is TensorFlow, owned by Google, Torch owned by Facebook. We call our Sense Parrots. It's our own developed, architected deep learning platform algorithm, and that's supported by a supercomputer center, and that's also built by ourselves. And that's really the main differentiation. Our company as a company is very innovative, try to create our own innovation, and through those supercomputer centers. So the more data you collect around the world, inputs into that deep learning platform, the platform gets smarter.
Today, SenseTime has contracts with top phone makers, major telecoms companies, and large retailers.
We are really serving multiple sectors across different industries. Some of the industry we're serving in educational sector, healthcare, autonomous car driving, and security surveillance, a smart city. And what you have mentioned, the surveillance is just one part of our business. So we cut across multiple sectors and serving multiple clients around the world. For example, when you're going through the shopping mall, we can really have the data captured from the consumers and use that data, give to the retailers. They can analyze and give a better insights to these consumers.
Technology like this is set to grow even faster in China over the next few years. At the annual 2019 Two Sessions meeting, the government stressed the importance of taking a global lead in AI development by boosting investment in technologies and training more professionals in the country. Uche Okoronkwo, CGTN, Beijing, China.
All right then, tech of a different kind now. Electric cars, they are firmly in the limelight at the Geneva International Motor Show. It opens to the public on the 7th of March. Car makers at the exhibition say they would like to see a lot more support for charging stations and other necessary support infrastructure for EVs. CGTN's Timothy Ulrich is there.
Electric cars are taking center stage at the Geneva Motor Show that runs through March 17th. From luxury car maker Aston Martin to mass producer BMW, many car makers now offer electric models. They believe it's an enjoyable experience to charge their vehicles overnight, having a fully charged car in the morning and not having to go to the gas station.
Electrification is a key part of our strategy, and they provide a perfect case in Europe in particular, because we serve customers there with plug-in hybrids that actually want to have the ability to drive with zero local emissions, for example, in cities in pure electric mode, but then also have the ease of mind to drive longer distances, for example, during the weekend without having to recharge.
When it comes to long distance travel on the highways, there are certainly efforts to be made. Companies are investing in the creation of an adequate charging network over the next several years. Some car producers are urging governments and administrations to provide better infrastructure for electric cars.
Where definitely the politicians, the towns have to support is making charging within the town for people who live in the town accessible. Definitely is an area where we would love to see more activity.
Well, I think that charging facilities and the infrastructure are one of those elements. So we also call upon governments, local governments, EU at large, not to only put standards in, but also help in developing the infrastructure that is necessary to meet those standards.
Securing the electric market has become increasingly important for car makers as demand for traditional combustion engine vehicles slows in China and Europe. That comes as governments in Europe and China are enforcing tougher emissions rules. Meanwhile, prices are falling for batteries. The electric cars under the lights at the Geneva Motor Show may increase the likelihood that larger numbers of battery-powered cars will be on the roads in the next several years. Timothy Ulrich, CGTN.
All right, then let's run through some commodity prices here for you. Little in the way of movement as far as these are concerned, but there is something else that's of import to us here tonight. AMCU, since the union went on strike at Sibanye Stillwater facilities in November, 9 people have been killed and about 62 houses have been burned down. South Africa's Mineral Resources Minister has now gone to the point of asking the police to step in and restore order. Why does that matter? South Africa is home to the planet's biggest known deposit of platinum group metals. It accounts for roughly 90% of global output, and spot platinum prices are around 4.1% higher on a year-to-date basis. Here's what's coming up next. We'll be looking at Microsoft's Azure cloud centers in South Africa. And we'll take a hike with Morocco's first mountain climber to scale 7 summits in the world.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back to the program. Microsoft has set up 2 new cloud centers in Cape Town and Johannesburg, South Africa. Now, the new facilities are designed to offer clients across the continent more access to a broader range of services beyond just cloud storage and computing. Sumitra Naidu has the details on Grassroots tonight.
It's good news for business, tech enterprises and every other company that uses digital processes, as Microsoft Azure has officially launched in South Africa. The new enterprise grade will power emerging cloud, artificial intelligence and edge computing innovations for South Africa and the rest of the continent.
Others are more like do the hosting model. Put a building, put some machines in there and say, hey, come and host your stuff in there. This is not what we're doing. We're a hyperscale cloud, which means not just the size is large, not only the network is large, but the ecosystem of developers, applications, services, and partners is huge. This is where the hybrid comes from. It's physical infrastructure plus an ecosystem around it.
Research shows that 90% of companies in South Africa increased their spend on cloud computing in 2017, and demand is growing. Huawei launched its cloud offering in 2018, and Amazon is planning to provide new services in South Africa later this year.
We commissioned actually an IDC study, right, to talk about the impact of this investment and the impact of data centers on countries, and we looked at 2017 to 2022 over a period of 5 years, and what cloud spending will be for the country, and it will move from 4.3 billion to 11.5 billion, which means it will literally triple. We will actually drive additional revenue because businesses will focus more on innovation, and we will be able to build digital businesses at scale. That could generate 112,000 net new jobs, and we think the Microsoft ecosystem could contribute at least 53,000 of those new jobs to the economy.
Microsoft Azure is already in 54 regions across the world, but these 2 new centers are the first hyperscaled data centers in Africa, which will give clients the opportunity to either keep their data locally or expand globally. Microsoft has invested millions of dollars in the state-of-the-art infrastructure. It's also expanding its investment in new programs for skills development and training for the 4th industrial revolution.
It puts South Africa at the center of the African development, which therefore gives us a responsibility to say, how do we go to our African brothers and sisters to say, here is it, do you choose to go to Europe or you come to South Africa? And when they come to South Africa, it therefore tells that our GDP will then grow.
As part of its empowerment projects, it will also be rolling out new technology to assist small-scale farmers in South Africa. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
And finally, a Moroccan mountaineer has become the first woman in the country to scale the 7 summits of the world. She hopes to inspire girls to conquer their fears and achieve their dreams. Here's Chamgono with more.
I am really very proud and very happy to be able to achieve this great challenge and to become the first person in Morocco to achieve this challenge of the 7 summits of the world.
At the age of 26, Bukra Baibano climbed the highest peak in Morocco, Toubkal. Since then, she had traveled the globe to climb each of the continent's highest mountains, conquering the 4,897 meters. Her determination has seen her reach the summit of Antarctica's Mount Vinson.
With will, with a lot of perseverance, one can even achieve dreams as big as to climb Everest and to achieve a challenge like climbing the 7 summits of the world.
She continues to support the fight on violence against women and girls.
I don't identify as feminist. I think of myself as a person more than a woman. I am a normal person who managed to seize her chance, who worked on herself to make something of herself, to realize her dreams.
Her mountaineering passion has required a lot of financial support.
The key figures of this great adventure of the 7 summits for 8 years from 2011 until the end of 2018 are about 43,000 vertical meters climbed and about 2 million dirhams spent on the project.
Bukra Baibanu hopes to inspire women to believe in themselves.
I hope to be a role model, especially for young girls, so that they too dare to make something of themselves, to believe in themselves, to believe in a dream.
As well as doing community work, Baibanu gives talks in schools and universities around the country. She's also campaigning to develop mountain tourism in Morocco. Chomhono, CGTN.
Right, and a quick run through currencies here for you. So let's focus on Zambia for the time being. Zambia's finance minister says the country intends to do an interesting little debt swap. They'll swap the debt from China from being denominated in the US dollar into the RMB. The idea being to ease pressure on the country's limited FX reserves. Discussions on that, according to Margaret Monakatwe, will happen sometime in late March. Zambia's currency, the kwacha, has had a very bad 2018. It lost about 23% of its value in the last 12 months, and it's been relatively flat to the dollar so far in 2019 at about 12 or so to the greenback. That's it for tonight's edition of Global Business Africa. As always, we're keen on your thoughts on the content you've seen here in the last hour. There's several ways of getting your thoughts back to us, all of them on your screen right now. I'm Ramah Nyang in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Thank you for your company in the last 16 minutes. The World Today is up next from Washington, D.C.